for me, that's actually, you're hitting on a point, which is that I guess in North America, if you will, and this is really a big generalization because it's not totally that way, but the parameters for jazz are much more narrow and what it is. But like you leave North America and you get to Europe or other place, what the parameters for what they consider jazz, it's a much broader spectrum, right? North America, we still have jazz in some sort of time capsule in the way we present it sometimes. But for Europeans, for Middle Easterns, it's a still breathing life form, right? Jazz is still evolving.
You're listening to some of the brand new record from our special guests on today's episode of the Innersleeve Music Podcast. This is Thompson Egbo-Egbo with What Remains, the brand new album. I'm Cassius Morris, Joe Pacheco joining me on the line, and welcome to the Innersleeve Podcast. Joe, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm going well, man. When I hear this kind of jazz, I'm finally so happy to get our first jazz artist. Took us 98 episodes to get
an episode or two. Definitely. I feel like we've probably covered the whole gamut now. We've had everything from blues to jazz to EDM. I mean, maybe some world music might be missing.
Well, no, we've had some of that stuff.
We've even had that,
yeah. I think the only thing we've had extreme like death metal. We've had like EDM, country, folk. Yeah, maybe you're right, man. Actually, now that I think about it, maybe we just haven't gotten maybe someone like maybe a soundtrack. That would be cool.
Oh, that'd be interesting too.
Scorer, composer. I might reach out to a few that we know here. So yeah, definitely.
We've always got some tricks up our sleeve. Some sad news in the world of hip hop today. Rapper Takeoff, the 28-year-old MC from rap group Migos, has been shot and killed in Houston, Texas. Now, this story has just come out this morning. Obviously, very, very sad. And Takeoff posting on his Instagram, Joe, as recently as at least since when I checked, 10 hours ago, as of when we're recording this. I mean, this is sort of sudden.
Yeah, it's spooky too, right? It's like a little creepy because like even a few weeks back, we saw Mika Ben just, so happy to be playing in Paris in a big venue, and then, passed away on stage. And now we woke up to this. Like, this is literally half hour ago. It's like we woke up to this news of, sadly, another rapper, another artist, or just another person getting killed in his prime, a very young age.
Definitely very, very sad. Now, for anybody who hasn't been familiar with the Migos in recent years, the trio actually broke up. They split up with their third guy, Offset, they're actually all related, by the way. So now they go by Neff and Few. Or Uncle and Few. I'm sorry, because Uncle Takeoff and Quavo were uncle and nephew. So at the end of the day, they were doing their own thing, and it looks like the duo now has been stopped short. Now, some details about this actual story: police responded shortly after 2:30 in the morning to reports of a shooting at the 810 Billiards and Bowling Alley, where dozens of people had gathered on a balcony outside on the third floor of the alley. Now, there are rumors also, Joe, that this shooting, and I hate to even say this because it's just so senseless, but it may have occurred over a game at this alley. We're hearing maybe a dice game.
I just want to add that, like, so people keep in mind, because when you're watching this, we actually taped this on the Tuesday morning, and like when, we publish a few days later, so stuff may have come out that we don't know about yet. But I mean, as what we know, when I hear stuff like that, like, it just sounds like, not that any death is like whatever, but it's just like, don't make it a wasteful one like that, like over a game or some stupid rivalry or somebody's jealous of something, and you take away an artist in his prime kind of thing,
Yeah, it's definitely a shame. 28 years old, and rest in peace to him. And we're sending obviously our condolences to the family. Definitely, it's going to be it's to be seen what's going to happen. It's to be seen whether Quavo and Offset are going to set aside their differences and maybe come together, go to the funeral. But at the end of the day, what really matters is another life lost. And everybody here at the SoundMojo family sends their condolences to the family of Migos. Now it's time to hop into our Versus segment. This, of course, is the part of the show where we read from the SoundMojo Community tab. If you're not subscribed, make sure to hit youtube.com/SoundMojo to come and join the fun and let us know what you think about all of these polls and questions we put up. We have them almost every single day. Today was one of the hardest ones I think we've done, Joe, because we had a three-way poll. Here we asked, who is the Riffmaster? Jimmy Page, Tony Iommi, or James Hetfield, which, oh my head is exploding just thinking about this.
Yeah, well, our audience, out of 105 votes, Jimmy Page took the cake. in terms of riff, 65%.
Wow.
14 for Tony Iommi, which is really surprising for me. And James Hetfield, 21%. Now, I'm not surprised about this because these are all the Riffmasters. This is why I did this. Like, I'm sure there's a ton more out there, but I mean, Jimmy Page, the OG of OG Riffmasters for me. Tony Iommi, is basically like the heavy metal Riffmaster, and then James Hetfield. But this is really surprising to me.
I can't believe Iommi didn't win, Joe. Like, I got to be honest, man. Listen, Hetfield is valid. But I don't know. For me, I'm comparing Whole Lotta Love to Paranoid or like Black Dog to Iron Man. I'm saying Iommi all the way, man.
It's interesting because they're also riff masters of three completely different genres. Well, maybe less Tony Iommi and James Hetfield is more different eras, right, of metal and thrash metal. But yeah, definitely was surprising. Now that I look at it now, I'm kind of looking at it like, well, what did I expect, to be honest? I would have given 100 because they're all amazing riffs to each one of them, right?
No doubt. It's fascinating to think also, though, that without Jimmy Page, there may not have been a James Hetfield as we know it. And, Iommi, that's debatable. But the influence of Page is definitely not something you can question. So let's read from the comments. We definitely got some good responses here from you guys.
Yeah, so Renee Catanias, Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin Forever, GB16, the only one I know about here is James Hetfield from Metallica. Fair enough.
Really?
But everybody has like who they respected, right? And who
that's true, and who they've heard of too.
Yeah, which our guest on the show actually explains. When you want to figure out jazz, go listen to someone and listen to who they listen to and stuff like that. Go backwards, and you'll discover that. So Game X Simmons, Tony, because he deserves more. He does more with less. 100%. I understand where you're coming from with that. And Eric Granados Taylor, Jimmy Page. So definitely a surprising one for me. But what was I expecting, to be honest?
Honestly, yeah. Look, like I say, Jimmy Page is the rock star's rock star. Like, if you ask any of the guys from Kiss to Motley Crue, they will tell you there will be none of this music without Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin. And I find it like when you can create something and be a pioneer, I think it's a different league than being influenced. You know what I mean? So I feel like Jimmy Page is definitely a pioneer.
And piggybacking on what you're saying, I think they're each, like I was saying earlier as well, like they're each pioneers, like in each genre, right? So you have the classic rock, and then you have the heavy metal, sort of like with Tony, and then thrash metal 20 years later with James, who pretty much, he's not the only thrash metal. There was Dave Mustaine. We all know that kind of stuff, but I think these three are like, the riff masters personally for me. But
so who's your favorite? Personally,
okay, I would probably say, and I'm sure I'm going to piss off a lot of people out there, but Iommi would probably be the least one of the two. It's really hard for me to pick between James and Jimmy because they're so different, and I love them both so much.
I know you love Metallica, man, for sure. So it's
Metallica was my bread and butter growing up in my my teens, and like that was my Led Zeppelin of my era for me. The Metallica. Whereas
exactly.
Jimmy Page was already, and Tony Iommi were already established when I got there. Metallica was when I was like going crazy for them. Everybody was telling me, "What, are you crazy? What is this noise? What is this?" Right? So I knew I was on the right path as soon as people were telling me.
That makes me like it more.
Yeah, because it was the same thing with Motley Crue. When I got it really young into Motley Crue with Shout at the Devil, it was like, "What is this? What is this?" I'm like, "All right, this is good." And look at where these bands ended up. They ended up like at the top.
50 years later, they're on the stadium tour still, right? So it's like, who won?
That's it.
Here we asked, who is a band or musician you really regret never getting the chance to see perform live?
I have a couple here like that. I didn't realize until it was too late. Like, Whitney was one. I never got to see her, but it's not someone I regret not seeing. I sort of wish I would have. But this one for me, Eddie Van Halen, was definitely like, damn, I can't believe I didn't go see this guy. I probably had a few opportunities over the years, but yeah, you always think, I catch them next time. Right?
Exactly. The one for me that stings is Prince, actually. He did a special concert. There were like 2 one-off concerts in Halifax, actually, out of nowhere when I lived there. He wasn't even on tour, I don't think. And I really wish I would have gone. It was like a Purple Rain tour, like a reissue of it. So yeah, it was amazing. I guess it was amazing.
No, I heard some really good stuff because like a couple years back, Prince came here too. I think during the Jazz Fest, and he did two nights. Completely different shows. I think it was just him and a piano Honestly, I think it was just that. And I remember someone who went and like you couldn't get tickets fast enough or even maybe afford it. I don't remember at the time now.
Well, that's a
but
factor
I know somebody who went and they were like blown away, and it's just him and a piano or something. And I was like, wow, I missed that. You know, so yeah, Prince is definitely one I also never got a chance to see. I mean, like so many others.
So many.
Let's check out some of the comments here. So we have the Nameless Gula. Welcome back.
Yes.
David Bowie. There's another one. David Bowie.
Gosh.
Never got a chance to see him. So he says it's been 6 years and still hard to believe he's gone. The man and his music had a profound effect on my younger self, and my appreciation for both only grew as I got older. For sure, man.
Well, my mom told me,
legendary.
Gula, about the Glass Spider tour when she went to see that. So I got all the memories from that. So that's the closest I've been to seeing Bowie, was having the mental imagery of that.
Yeah, that's it. George Moo. George Michael in his older years. That's true. That's someone else I never got a chance to see. King of Losers music review. For me, it's Prince. There you go. We mentioned Prince as well. My father blasted his music in the house like it was a religion. Good father.
Yeah, seriously. Sure. Simon, are you guys adopting?
Yeah, that's it. Eddie Van Halen, there's my pick. Red Warrior Studios. And there's a ton of musicians that passed before him. Exactly, but I'll never get to see, he says, but Van Halen or Dio. But he says, I'm very fortunate to have seen Def Leppard, Joan Jett, Poison, and Motley Crue. Well, I guess he went to the stadium.
Yeah, he went to the tour. I was going to say, what a coincidence.
Yeah, Renee Catania's Marvin Gaye, Earth, Wind, and Fire, and the Four Tops. Wow.
Okay,
yeah.
interesting.
Those are definitely some legendary
Getting
artists.
a time machine for that one.
Andre King, Whitney Houston for me, for sure. Linkin Park. I did get to see Linkin Park once.
Really? How was that?
Yeah, very good. Very good.
I can imagine they put on a phenomenal show.
It was great. I mean, those guys just have a knack, or had a knack, for just writing 3-minute, hard-hitting, but super catchy songs,
Yeah.
Just awesome.
Bit of rap, bit of rock.
Yeah. Freddie Mercury by Anton and Jelson. I won't say the middle name.
Yeah, we're not going to try that one.
Yeah. So Freddie Mercury and Tupac. Yeah, me too. Miss those. That's for sure. Terrian Smith. For me, it's Michael Jackson. Man.
Yeah.
That too. I wish I would have seen him when I was a kid. That would have been.
Man, I know people. I've heard of people who don't even really like music that much who cried at his concerts. So it's incredible.
Yeah, that's for sure. Here with Freddie Mercury, we have AAAAAS2, Eddie Van Halen Forever. Not
a lot of EVH.
Yeah. Well, I guess because I put him in the picture, maybe that sort of triggers, right? Most who, not Donald Fagen, most who had passed before I was a fan or had a grasp on death. So really no one. You love George Harrison, Biggie, Nirvana. Yeah. Like if it's so many, right? Like when you start thinking of them, they just start all of a sudden just start showing up. Randy Rhoads. Oh my God. Just before I saw this, or maybe I saw it, but Randy Rhoads is one. He was gone before he was gone before I even got into rock or metal or knew of Randy Rhoads. Chris Cornell, yeah, definitely another one. It's true. Now that I think about it, because also Lane Staley, we just had that versus Lane Staley and versus Chris Cornell. I missed both those guys.
Chris, I got to see. I may have told this story on the show, but I ended up sneaking to the front row of one of his theater shows, and I literally was standing at his feet watching him perform, and it was impeccable performance.
What a singer, man! What a voice, that guy. Bob Marley for sure. I'm Bob Marley, Mr. Larry 84. So yeah, definitely, man.
Bob Marley, probably one of the coolest concerts that could have been. I feel like anybody would find that cool, even if you're not really into him.
Exactly.
So now it's the part of the show where we jump into you guys' listener suggestions. This is, of course, the post we put up every single week on the SoundMojo YouTube page, asking you guys to send your favorite songs for us to listen and react to. And we give you a shout out and listen right here, right now on the air. And always a very diverse group of songs, Joe. I feel like we've never had one where it's all rock or all metal. It seems to always be different tracks from our audience.
That's the beauty of it. Yeah, I love that.
It's so nice. So the first one that we got here, we might as well just jump right into it. This one is called La La Noir with Luminous Flux, which is a very interesting name in all. What was your first reaction on this one, Joe? Because I can definitely tell you mine.
Well, this was another suggestion by AUR, and I enjoyed this one. I like the fact that it had it stayed melodic the whole way through, in the sense that even if it's glitchy or experimenting with stuff, but there was always a nice underlying melody that didn't great, get on my, get me, come on, give me some melody instead of just like some sounds,
Yeah, no, I could hear that. I mean, see, for me, I'm still very new to this kind of music. So for me, like, I think it's good and everything, but I don't know. It doesn't really grab me as much. So I liked it. And I think like to produce a song like this, it requires massive talent, but maybe not a playlist song for me. This next one here was really interesting. This is called Disciple, We Don't Play, the Rushdown Mega Collab Remix. So this was sort of like a UK rap mixed with EDM, which like for me was really interesting. I could definitely hear this at a rave. Again, maybe not music I would be playing at home, Joe, but like I feel like especially with EDM, there's always a time and a place for it. You know what I mean? Like,
when I listened to it, when I saw that, like, because he explained that there was 12 artists and ended up being 64, but I think it was 44 when I looked it up. And
insanity.
I was expecting a mess. Like I was expecting what's going to happen. Like it's going to be, everybody's just going to be doing their glitches or their whatever it may be. It's like when you have like 17 guitar players on stage doing blues. If they're all playing, it gets messy, But no, this didn't do that at all. It was super well maintained. Like it took care of itself, and you had different sections were well defined in it. And I was definitely into this one. I liked it.
I'm definitely impressed that it had that many people. Like I didn't actually realize it had 44 artists on this one piece of music. So like considering that's absolutely insane. I was just going, I guess, strictly from a sound perspective. But again, like I can hear the talent in it, and it's definitely a world that I'd like to get deeper into.
I wonder like what the splits look like, the sheet, in terms of who to pay,
yeah. Oh my God. Everyone makes a fraction of a penny in their royalties.
We already make a fraction of a penny.
Even if you own everything, you make a fraction. Yeah, so
that's it. Yeah. But definitely thanks again, AUR, for suggesting these two tracks.
100%.
What do we have next?
This next one we have here on my list is Broken Peach. This is Halloween.
All right.
And so this, I don't know if you guys are familiar with Broken Peach. I certainly was not. But if you guys get the chance, if you're by a computer, I highly recommend you look this up, because this is one of the most interesting videos. And Joe, I was just picturing this. Imagine you're on a trail run in the middle of the woods and you see 8 people dressed like this. I mean, this would be one of the wildest visuals ever.
Yeah, it was. Like, again, another suggestion, a fantastic suggestion by here, and out of nowhere, but perfectly for Halloween, because that's when we were listening to it. But I laughed instantly. Like you're saying, if I would have been, well, actually, if I was, on a jog or on a walk and I saw that, I don't know if I would laugh. I think I'd be like, what the
be scared, exactly,
is
right?
going on here,
Some sort of ritual or something. I'd be like, hey, they're pretty good too. Like,
yeah. Well, some of the, I'm going to pull out my musician, whatever snobbiness, but some of the vocal harmonies were a bit throwing me off, like in the sense that they were sometimes, conflicting, which may have been on purpose, which is definitely an artistic choice. It's cool. Right. But what I liked about it was that it was, it's always the same kind of songs for Halloween or Christmas, right? So this was different for me. It was the first time I'd ever seen this.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, honestly, for me, I think it was cool. I can kind of hear what you're saying about the vocal harmonies. I definitely enjoy the fact that like the people were really into it. The one girl with the megaphone and the drums, like she's spinning her sticks. Like even the guys in the background are really into it. And I also wonder where they're at. Like this almost looks like maybe Europe. Like I'm not sure. But
I think so. I got that European kind of feeling.
Yeah.
May totally be wrong. Yeah.
It's very cool to see though. And definitely like a good level of talent. So I definitely recommend this one to people. I enjoyed it. Now this next track is called Do Your Worst by the Happy Fits. And happy they are indeed. When I put this song on, Joe, it reminded me of almost a mixture of Rival Sons mixed with Oasis in a weird way. You know what I mean? Like it was almost like some pop, like you could hear the rock elements of it, but I could definitely hear the pop elements of it too. Maybe almost like a 21 Pilots type of vibe in a way.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. I love the intro. It was interesting. The whole pineapple being outlawed and all that stuff. I'd never heard of these guys before. Had you heard about them?
I'd never heard about them. No. And honestly, I think it's a shame because like I think they have a much nicer balanced sound than a lot of these groups. Like a lot of these guys, it sounds like it was just written in a pop workshop and pumped out and it could have been anybody singing it. But these guys, I get more originality, and the fact that they put so much effort into the video too. Like if you guys get to check the video again, it's called Do Your Worst by the Happy Fits. Very, very well done. Like just cinematically really well done. And you can tell they put a lot of effort in. So I give this a really high rating, actually.
Yeah, man, I think the song was fantastic. I mean, I loved everything about it. Like, I love the fact that it was super catchy, the driving beat, the interesting guitars and lines in the background with the chorus, and that chorus was just bang on for me, you know. So definitely high thumbs up. This is like, I'll just go out right now and say this is my favorite of the week so far.
Awesome, man. There we go. Yeah, this is definitely up there for me. And like the different instruments, the like you say, the selling of the pineapple, very intricate and very interesting track. Yeah. The next song we had, sorry.
I was just gonna say that was a great suggestion by Game X Simmons. Him too. He just nails them every week.
Shout out to Game X Simmons. Now, this next one, who suggested this one, Joe? This one is called Hugh Maskela, Hope.
Yeah. It was suggested by not Donald Fagen, which makes sense because Donald seems to be more of like I don't know if I can't remember every time he suggested, but he's always suggested more like this is jazzy, right? And there's like different kind of stuff, you know. So I had heard of the name Hugh Masekela many times before, but I hadn't heard this yet, and I really enjoyed this.
I've never heard any of this actually, man, to be honest. Like I'm on the same page as you. And, you know, obviously he recommended the whole album. So I listened to a couple of tracks. Yeah. And at the end of the day, I think it was really, really nice. I felt like he was really nicely mixing a lot of different genres. It kind of reminded me of that old school singing of, I can't think of exactly who, right? Like the guy who sings What a Wonderful World, you know what I mean? But it also had that jazz vibe to it. And it just, I think it was very unique. I really liked it.
Yeah, was that Louis Armstrong you're thinking?
Yeah.
For me, like, as soon as I popped it on, I got that, you know, instant, like, you know, African Afro jazz kind of vibe, right? Yeah. But what was interesting about it, and I didn't know this was a live recording, because until I heard it, all of a sudden I hear audience clapping. I was like, whoa, this is live. That's how good these guys were.
See, that's insane that we don't even pick up on it, right?
It was like, it reminded right away of like Sting and Peter Gabriel in the 90s. And it made a lot of sense because those guys did go a lot of world music into their pop elements, you know, especially Sting and whatever. So right away I thought of like Peter Gabriel and like Sting vibes in the 90s. And then I saw that it was recorded in the 90s and like, wow, that makes a lot of sense then, you know, because like that was the vibe of like, you know, incorporating African or different world elements into a jazzy pop kind of sound.
That was like the Phil Collins era too, right? Like, you know, all those drums are very sort of African centered if you really take it back to like the original drum rhythms and stuff. Yeah. So very interesting for sure, man. So shout out to everybody out there who sent us listener suggestions. Listen, I think that, I don't know, it's hard to pick my favorite one for this week, but I might have to echo you, Joe, and say it might be the Happy Fits with Do Your Worst. I think like that whole product was just really well put together, and I gotta say I'm impressed.
Yeah, same here, man. Thank you again, everyone, for these awesome suggestions, and we'll have more next week for sure.
Now we're going to hop into the interview portion of today's episode. It was a pleasure to be joined by Thompson Egbo-Egbo. He's a jazz musician who really is eclectic, and he's been playing piano since the age of 6, Joe. I mean, you know, when you talk about classically trained guys, this is about as classically trained as it gets. We spoke with him about moving from Nigeria to Canada at the age of 4, his musical roots, the way that he's continued on the traditions of his classic music up until today. There was a lot to cover here, Joe, and honestly, a really good conversation with Thompson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I enjoyed the fact, like, we're, you know, just because, you know, we always bring up, like, is rock dead? Is this happening? Whatever. But, like, jazz has been around way before rock and all that stuff, and it's still around. It's mutated into hundreds of different forms, but it's still not the mainstream, you know. So I'm like, why isn't it the mainstream? Such good musicians, such good talent, so much work and effort put into being such a great musician and writing good stuff,
still making fresh new stuff.
Yeah, and it's barely recognized by the majority of the public, you know. Like, it's just goes way under the radar, which is always sad for me, you know. But it's kind of also like, it's mine. It's like it's mine. I'm cool because I know this, and you don't know this kind of.
Yeah,
vibe,
exactly.
You know?
Yeah, it's our secret now.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, we appreciate Thompson for coming on the show. And listen, again, if you're an up and coming artist out there of any genre, get out your notepad. You're going to want to listen to every word of this, and we'll catch you guys right afterwards. Thompson, thank you so much for joining us on Innersleeve today.
I'm supposed to reply to that?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're
Sorry,
gonna start that over.
we're just gonna act like we just started talking.
Yeah.
Cool.
Just for the recording.
I'm
So,
just
yeah,
actually, I was just, that's my sense of humor. I was just teasing.
okay, man. Okay. I'm
love it
sweating
already.
over here. Oh man, how's it going, Thompson?
Good.
Awesome, man. We appreciate you taking the time to join us. You're calling in from Toronto, Ontario. Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm in Toronto.
Awesome, man. Sounds good. So what's going on in Toronto right now? Every time I look at my phone, it's like I'm seeing a different event or concert that's happening out there.
Yeah, you know what? Things have been, I'd say, finally opening up. I feel like we've got a bit of a hangover over here, kind of slate. You know, we're on a time delay with things just, I wouldn't say back to normal, because whatever that means, but just with things moving forward, you know, it's been quite the slow trudging.
Yeah.
So
I see
what?
Sorry, I was just
Joe.
going to say, we saw that you've performed recently, right? Like just like a few days ago.
Yeah. So there's a Kensington Market Jazz Festival. So that's been going on for a few years. And back, I guess they wouldn't have been in person last year. So back in person, and I did 2 shows there. So one show on the Saturday at Tom's clothing store, which is a suit shop. And then the venue used to be Poetry Jazz Cafe, is now called Tapestry, but I don't know if you're familiar with venues in Toronto, but it's the owners of the place called Oud and Fuzz, and they've now taken over that space. And I'm excited for the space, because I think what they've done with Oud, and really just kind of, I'll say to a friend, I think it's such a great, that place in Drum are some really unique venues in the city that are, I think, being true to the diversity and multiculturalism in the city. And there hasn't been spaces, like we've got these musicians who are coming into the city from different parts of the world. And I feel like there hasn't been like really good local venues for showcasing that. And Oud and Fuzz and Drum would be like 2 places where I'm like, those are places you want to see, you know, like Ethiopian jazz or Arabic jazz, go check those places out. If you want to see something you really wouldn't see at any other venue, they're really bringing some of that stuff to the spotlight, and it's exciting. So I'm excited for what that space is to become.
It's cool because I'm sure like it's mostly like rock clubs, right? And like and stuff like that. So what makes that place so like better or special now in the sense of like compared to another club?
So for me, I think it's just going to be who they bring in, right? Because it's even, you know, if you look at some of the artists that are playing there, they're not even artists who, if, you know, I guess the term jazz is so loose, they're not even artists you're necessarily seeing in what we would consider some of the regular jazz venues, right? And what I like about them, and even with poetry, even though now they've moved to like Queen Street area, is they're a different segment of the city, and they're different audience. So it's not the same audience I would see if I went to like the Rex or something, or if I went to the Jazz Bistro. It's like a whole, and it's why I used to really enjoy playing at Poetry Jazz Cafe, because it was a very different crowd. It was really expanding who was out looking for music, looking for entertainment. And it also was broadening, I think, the aspect of who we kind of traditionally assume is going to see jazz shows, and it totally wasn't. So that's why I'm excited about it, because I think, one, the more venues, the better, but 2, when we start to see that diversity, and it's part of it too, is like it's the caliber of musicianship, right? It's like, it's not guys who are just like, hey, we're here playing for fun and we're doing this like really kind of neat thing. It's guys who are in their own right also playing internationally, and maybe doing so more than some of the other local acts. And so I think it's really a miss on anyone who hasn't had a chance to see some of those artists. So
it's interesting because like I always find, like, I've been a huge jazz fan for like over 20 years, like, but it's more like there's like one, maybe we used to have a dedicated here in Montreal where I'm from, like we used to have a dedicated jazz station, and that lasted a few years, and then it just like disappears and becomes talk radio or something like that. And I find like, you know, what do you think about like jazz in the mainstream? Like it always seems to be like, late at night, kind of like a radio station or something will put some jazzy stuff, or like, what do you think about like the mainstream?
Well, you know, I mean, so for me, that's actually, you're hitting on a point, which is that I guess in North America, if you will, And this is really a big generalization because it's not totally that way, but the parameters for jazz are much more narrow, and what it is. But like you leave North America and you get to Europe or other place, what the parameters for what they consider jazz, it's a much broader spectrum, right? And so
more instruments, or in what sense?
Even styles.
In just the interpretation, right?
Yeah. Okay.
So if you will, and again, it depends on who you talk to, but for lack of a better explanation of it is, North America, we still have jazz in some sort of time capsule in the way we present it sometimes. But for Europeans, I guess if we're talking about what we were just alluding to with drum or oud and fuzz, it's like for Middle Easterns, it's a still breathing life form, right? Jazz is still evolving. It's not what 1920s was, or like it didn't stop innovating in the 50s or whatever, if we want to take it that way. And so that's why for me it's been really cool to just see who's doing what, how they're doing it, what new perspective, what new interpretation they're bringing to the music, because it's like I was saying to a friend of mine the other day, I was like, we're all still using the same 12 tones, right? So we're still like, how far away can you go before it isn't something else? It hasn't brought in elements of everyone's music into what it is you're creating, right? And now having music, regardless of where the music is from, being so accessible, those lines are blurring even more, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
100%.
So would you say that there's a bunch of, because for example, on TikTok in North America here, you'll see, a bunch of young guitar players or young rappers that are really coming up and evolving that space. Would you say in different parts of the world, there's a lot of young jazz players that are coming up and maybe continuing that evolution?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. For sure. I think all of the music, I think it's just a crossover, right? But I think part of it too, for me, when I think about it, is like, how could they not? Like, you've got access to, you got the exposure. Like, how could it not influence what you're doing? And so.
So how about in terms of your roots, going back to you growing up in Nigeria, what are your memories sort of from that point up until 6 years old musically? Was music even in the picture at that point, or did that come in later in Toronto?
Well, no. Well, for me, I actually moved to Canada when I was 4. So my memories,
okay.
My memories actually of life, beginning Canada. I have visited, I have been back, but they're here. And as far as music goes, for me, I actually don't have any memories. It's kind of funny to say, people are like, I don't remember a time not playing the piano. Like, obviously, I remember studying the piano, growing, getting better or whatnot. But I don't have a vivid memory of what it was, of what life was pre playing the piano versus after playing the piano.
That's interesting.
It's always been that, and it for musically influences. My early years, like my mom listened to a lot of religious music, but a lot of Nigerian religious music. So like I grew up listening to, what could only, I guess, be described as kind of Afrobeat. There was, throwing some R&B, things like that. It was very sort of wholesome exposure. And so, like a lot of musicians, I had to go to church. So like I grew up playing in church. So, and my church was a very, very white church. So our gospel music sounded like country. It wasn't the gospel music that people would, think of if they think of people like Kurt Franklin or something like that.
The process version of gospel.
yeah, for sure. Right. So, think Ray Charles, like country era. Right. So but as a result, though, I think for me, I've been lucky that there's been a wide range of exposure, right, to music. And so there's been that what was home. Obviously, there's what you get at school and what people are listening to. And then, then you have like your grade 8 or whatever, your middle school dances, and there's the music there. And so for me, that would have been like, TLC and SWV and things like that,
Right.
the Puff Daddy era. So
All the No Limit, all that stuff. Yeah. I mean,
yeah, exactly.
it's interesting in Canada because it's such a melting pot, of so many different things. Did you find that it was pretty easy to sort of go back to the Nigerian roots and also sort of get accustomed to what was in Canada because it is such a melting pot?
Not as much. I didn't grow up. There are definitely pockets of Nigerian communities here. I didn't grow up around one. What I think actually is interesting is I lived in Greece for a little bit, and I remember meeting with some Nigerian musicians, and they were playing Afrobeat, and I saw how popular Afrobeat was like in Europe. So I would kind of go around the country playing with them, and it's interesting now to see it in Europe. It was a like art form that people were very much playing a lot of music coming directly from Africa. Here we kind of played by way of its roots through like, I guess, Black people, if you will. But now you're starting to see it directly coming over. So like now the influences of Afrobeat coming directly from the continent as opposed to through the interpretation of, jazz or whatever other music form it's coming up. So it's been interesting to see sort of that journey where I hear stuff now and I'm like, oh, that's cool. That sounds old to me, but it's like, what's the pop stuff now on the radio? So just especially how it's expressed rhythmically and stuff. So.
How did you get end up playing the piano? Is it just because it was around, or because you could have been? Oh, maybe you played drums, guitar. I don't know.
Well, I did play the drums. Took drum lessons for years, and also played the tuba. How I got into music was when I was in grade. I don't know if it was senior kindergarten, grade 1. Basically, my teacher told my mom that there was something wrong with me. They're like, yo, there's something wrong with your kid. You should go get him checked out. He probably needs to be put on Ritalin. And my mom was like, my mom, fortunately for her, was like, that's kind of weird. And, not to say anything controversial, but whatever, if you know anything about pharmaceuticals and the history in African nations, specifically in Nigeria, the idea of just like giving yourself something to like a kid because of a behavior seems very bizarre. And so, my mom was just like, didn't really know what to do. Was kind of, what she tells me, she was sitting in the hallway of the school, got this news and was a little distraught. Somebody came up to her and asked her what was going on. And she was like, oh, they told me there's something wrong with my kid. They need to go get him tested or need to like put him on some drugs. And the person who, now I hadn't thought of it then, but as I've gotten older, I'm like, man, I wonder who the heck that person was. But this person just said to my mom, yeah, it's probably nothing wrong with your kid. Go take him and get some music lessons. He'll be fine. And so that's what my mom did. Yeah, that's literally how it happened. Wow. And so there was a music school, which was part of the community center that gave lessons to kids in the neighborhood, and the lessons were subsidized. So my mom could afford it at the time. When I moved to Canada, it was just my mom and sister. So my dad didn't move until a few years later. So she was just a single mother here. As you can imagine, the challenges there. Yeah. And so we were like, my piano lessons cost $2 a lesson, and like they cost that for like years, and that's how I got started.
I wish I could get that now. $2 a lesson today. That's not going to go far.
Holy, so I mean, was it very traditional lessons that you got, like just the straightforward basics, or what was the approach for those lessons?
Yeah, I just I took like the Royal Conservatory to classical lessons. And I, came up through that system, if you will. That's what was being taught. I find jazz a little later when I'm in high school, kind of find it through different paths and through different channels. But I think also it was great that I played other instruments. So when I got to school, I started playing in the band. So tuba, I started playing when I was in grade 6. Probably played that, until I played in a brass band until I was about 22, I think. So that's tuba actually stuck with me for a long time. Same with the drums. And I was fortunate to have different opportunities and outlets to to express those instruments as well. I also played the drums sometimes at church if I wasn't playing the piano. And so, I think I was lucky that there were always opportunities to perform.
One thing we were wondering about was, we were joking about like that there needs to be a Jazz for Dummies book or something, because, I think that, like you were talking about the disconnect in North America with jazz, with it being in that time capsule. I think a lot of people don't know where to start, or even like who some of the great jazz artists would even be to go to. So, I mean, as somebody who knows this field, who would you say, or maybe like what albums or projects would you say to start with for someone who wants to get into jazz?
For someone who wants to get into jazz, I would say work backwards, actually.
Okay.
So I would say I would start, like as you were talking about, Timecast. I would look at who is playing jazz now and then who is innovating and taking it to a different place. So I might say, hey, start off with like, a Christian Scott, or a Robert Clasper.
That's incredible. I just
and then move back from there, right? So like, obviously Christian Scott, like, Miles Davis is an influence. Look at some of the projects, and then start to go backwards and see how it comes from there and how the connections are, or where those connections are, some of the similarities, and then start to see what their influences are. So I would actually start, like, people would be like, hey, go, start with the basics. I'd be like, no, start with what is, what resonates with you the most. Start with what's closest to where you are musically, and then from there move backwards. Like, go see what some of their influences are, see who they've studied with, and see, the Americans are pretty cool because they see somebody who's very talented and they jump on it right away. So you start to see some of the schools of if you will, for lack of a better word, like schools of thought, but like through who they've done projects with, who's brought them on. Kenny Garrett's a great guy for putting on a lot of young guys onto all the projects he's on, right? Even if you're looking at, now I'm forgetting his name, it's just on the tip of my tongue, trumpet player, but Roy Hargrove. You look at some of the Hargrove stuff, Gerald Clayton's playing piano and some of that stuff, that connects you to that, and then going backwards and how it connects to there. So that would be my advice, which is like, where are you at right now musically? What is kind of the closest piece to that, and then start to dig into what they're doing, and then dig into what some of their influences are, and then make your way back, and then you can start to see, where those connections are and how they connect to that. So, and it's funny, not just for like jazz, but like if you think about rock and roll. Yeah, that'd be a great way to do that too. Like, okay, cool, you like rock and roll. Let's see how that connects. See how it connects to the Rolling Stones. How the Rolling Stones connect to Muddy Waters. Where Muddy Waters connects to, like, Screaming Jay Hawkins. Like, there's like, it's all coming from somewhere. And so, and I think that's a fun activity or fun path to just kind of start to break down the barriers of what you think of as genre, and how you compartmentalize things when you realize, wait a minute, but they're all like, what are these, like, why do some of these genre lines even exist when they're like literally the same music but called something different if the person looks different, who's creating it, right? So
that's the thing. And it's like a diagram in your head, right? You connect the dots and it's like you could see it all mapped out sort of visually if you're a visual thinker. So it's interesting to go and connect those dots.
It's funny. I had a reaction before when you mentioned Christian Scott, because I literally just searched him up, because that was the last new guy I remember being like really enamored with. Like, he brought like the whole hip hop vibe to, especially the first album here, or one of his first albums. I was like totally addicted to listening to it.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. Litany. No, was it?
Yeah, Litany. Okay, Anthem. So Anthem. Yes. So it's Rewind and Anthem is the next one. Funny story. So Christian Scott actually has, or at least those early albums, the guitar player is from Toronto. I used to go to band camp with him, and his name's Matt
I remember.
Stevens, and he was like, he's a little older than I am, like I think like a year or two. And I just thought he was the coolest guy, sweetheart of a dude, and was always just like really kind with me. And he'd gone to Berkeley, and I was like, oh man, Berkeley, what's that school? I want to go to Berkeley. You know, you're going there. And that's where he met Christian Scott,
Okay.
you know, and that's a really cool band because, you know, there's a piano player, Aaron Parks, who's there. And the last time I was in New York, I reached out to Aaron to take some lessons, to sit down, do some writing. So there's some influences from what Aaron's doing on my record, which is kind of funny because, you know, how the world is small. I just did an after party at TIFF for there's a movie done by Tyler Perry, but Terrence Blanchard did the music, and they're connected through, you know, schools of like the Seattle stuff. And it's funny how just all of this stuff works. They did a concert. I was in Boston for the summer, and they actually recorded live at Newport, and they did a concert at Berkeley. I went to go check it out before they went to Newport the next day to record the album. So, and when I saw him perform, I was like, whoa. I'm like, that's okay. I want people to feel the way I feel right now watching this guy. Christian Scott's, he's a bad dude. Yeah.
It's funny because I have that album autographed live at Newport from him because I saw him at the Montreal Jazz Fest way back, and I was literally front row at this beautiful place here, and like I got to sit there, and then at one point he takes a break while I think somebody else was soloing, and like he sat right next to me on the subwoofer, and I was just like, bro, I love you, man, like you're amazing, you know. And he signed my CD and stuff. And it's true that you mentioned that guitar player. The reason why I remember him is because he reminds me a lot of Pat Metheny, which is one of my big influences, you know, and that drummer too. I don't remember his name, but that drummer live was incredible. Anyways, enough about Christian Scott, but it was so funny that I had that reaction when you mentioned his name.
I love. He's been cool to listen to the evolution of how his albums have been developed over the past few years, and I've enjoyed. I've enjoyed every iteration that he has come to, and it's interesting because I don't know if you listened to the last album, Axiom, like there's a part where he talks about just not wanting to call the music jazz anymore. And he feels like jazz, he's like, we've crossed this, the century line of improvised music, for some people, they still want to call it jazz. He's like, I'm past that because that pulls, and I think part of it is it's like pulling me or pulling him into a space where people feel he needs to be, where it's like, no, now we're creating on the spot, and like this is what's coming out of it, right?
I remember reading, I mean, like Miles Davis was like hated the word jazz forever, right? And he was trying to get rid of it way back then, because it limits you, like although for me, like jazz is so there's every kind of jazz you can think of, right? There's like the classical jazz, there's rock jazz, there's fusion jazz, there's so it's like for something that encompasses so many genres, I understand why they want to push to go elsewhere. And I wonder what would be a new name for it. That would be interesting. Like instead of jazz, what would we call it? I don't know anymore.
Yeah, what would we call it?
Well, anyways, we're here to talk about your new album that's coming out October 28th. What Remains, right? And I remember when I got sent the album, I pressed play on the track Trinity, and right away I went, oh, and it made me think of that Christian Scott vibe only because of the sparseness of the piano, the drums, and the grooves, So I was like, I fell in love with it right away. So just let us know about the album. Like, how did it come together, recording and stuff?
Yeah, you know what? I was fortunate. I was working on a project for a company out in London called the Audio Network. So I put together some pieces to go into their catalog. And so I was like, oh, well, the trio is going to go in the studio. That is a bit of a bittersweet situation because I was supposed to actually fly to London and record at Abbey Road to this project. But obviously COVID hit, whatever. Such a cliche of an answer. I almost hate even speaking to it. But,
sad but true.
So, but the bittersweet part or the silver lining of the whole situation was I got to record the project with my trio because I would have recorded with a different set of musicians. So it meant I also I had time to sit with them and work through it. And because we were going in the studio, I was like, well, I might as well book another day and, record the album. You've been working on stuff. You've got a bunch of voice notes of stuff that you like. And actually, for the first time during COVID, it gave me an opportunity to actually go to voice notes that you create but never listen to. Mm-hmm. And I started piecing some of those things together.
The
And
best.
so that's where some of some of that music came from. Like I alluded to, I worked with Aaron Parks on some stuff. I was like, hey, let's sit down. I'd love to do like a little composition lesson with you, or like just sit through some things. I got some ideas from him. That's ended up on the record, actually featured in What Remains. That's a tune I workshopped with him. And so I was like, let's just, again, kind of thinking about like the first album, even whatever the second round. It's like, where are you right now musically? Let's put that out, and for me, the title of What Remains is just alludes to kind of everything that's happened, which has been, direct or indirect or a residual effect of what we've all gone through. And it's basically what remains is hopefully connection to people. And that's kind of what I wanted to put out. So.
So how about the cover version of Smells Like Teen Spirit? That's something else I wanted to ask you about. And I'm just curious how exactly that came about for you and what the story is with that.
I feel like we've just been chatting about it too. I would just piggyback literally off everything we've said, is that like the boundaries for what jazz is endless, right? And kind of there are no boundaries. That tune's a tune that the trio's been playing for years now, and we've always had a good reception to it. And thinking about just some things that we play, it's like, well, we get asked, where can we hear this? And it's one of those tunes, not that I had initially planned to record it, but then, you can only get asked, where can I hear this tune so many times before you're like, okay, I guess we should record it, right? So
it's an organic demand, right? Might as well listen to it.
Yeah, exactly.
No doubt. So, I mean, in terms of clearing this song, there was no clearance process, was there? Because I know it's different between a cover and a sample.
Yeah,
no, there still is a clearance process. In fact, actually, but it's a little easier when it's a cover versus a sample.
Right.
So the samples are almost impossible. And actually, too, we had a track that we did that hasn't made the album because we were concerned about some clearance issues. And it was actually two songs that we put together because it was started to blur the lines on that sampling side of things, even though it was like played and it was a completely different composition. So we, for wanting to put it up when we did, not knowing we'd get all the answers we needed to before, by the time we wanted to release the record, we made the decision just to pull it. So, but hopefully it'll make its way out at some point, maybe just as a standalone single or something.
So you guys recorded this album in a day?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's normal
insane.
For jazz. That's what I was going to say. That's normal for jazz. There's no 3 months in the studio kind of thing. It's like, no, that's good. Play, record, and put it out.
Yeah. Exactly.
Wow. Yeah. That is insane. So obviously here at Watch Mojo, we're well known for our top 10 list, and today's going to be no exception. We have pulled a list for you, Thompson, to take a look at, and we wanted to see if you could predict who the top 3 people on this list could be. I mean, maybe just your best guess. So the list here is the top 10 most influential jazz players of all time.
It's not hard, I don't think.
Yeah.
You know what? It is hard. I mean, that's not.
It is.
I feel like Miles Davis would be on there. Top 10. Oh.
Or your top
There's
3.
so many. You want me to pick the 3? I mean, I can just throw out names that I feel like should be there, but
there you go.
Top 10. So, yeah, I guess so. Miles Davis would be one. I would say Duke Ellington should be one. I might put Louis Armstrong, actually.
Wow.
But I think it also depends on your definition of jazz and where that comes from. So.
Well, I'm happy to say you actually predicted the top 3 to a T. It was Louis Armstrong at number 1, Duke Ellington at number 2, and Miles Davis at number 3. Yeah, we've never had that at all on the show.
Yeah.
That's
well,
crazy.
Obviously, there's also 4: Charlie Parker, Nat King Cole, John Coltrane, obviously. But I mean, at that point, Thelonious, you have Monk, you have. But yeah, I was surprised you nailed all 3 right off the bat.
That's killer, man. I love it. Well, listen, Thompson, we appreciate you so much for taking the time. Is there anything else you want to throw in about the new record, or really what's to come for you in your career?
Just go out and listen to it. I'm excited about it. I'm hoping to press it on vinyl too in the new year.
Nice.
And then we'll see. Yeah, we're playing. The band's playing in Aurelia next weekend. We're also doing a Oscar Peterson tribute with the Windsor Symphony Orchestra in February. So
Nice.
we're excited about just performing more and getting back to our audience.
Speaking of which, Oscar Peterson, we had it on the list here to ask you, but you portrayed Oscar Peterson in the little what is it, a historical minute kind of thing?
Yeah.
Canadian Heritage, yeah. So how what was it like to portray the great Oscar Peterson?
Oh, you know what? Honestly, you don't see it until you see it, right? So in the moment, you're just kind of playing the role. They tell you, hey, sit there, go there, whatever, right? But watching it's kind of cool because I'm like, wow, that's going to be around for a while, and you got to be a part of that. So, and that's fun.
That's great.
I love that. Thompson, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it, and keep kicking ass.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Huge shout out to Thompson Egbo-Egbo for joining us on episode number 98 of the Innersleeve Music Podcast. You know, Joe, I got to say, the fact that this guy just sat there and looked at us with a straight face and said, yeah, I recorded my latest album in a day. I mean, that was massively impressive to me.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say I'm really not surprised when it comes to jazz and classical musicians because, like I was saying before, we cut to the interview, is like, they don't have too much. They can't spend 3 months in the studio. There's like no budget, like you go, you record and you leave. And then it gets mixed after. Maybe you'll get a video or you do a video, that kind of thing. So it's different game, They're more like, I think they're living more by performing, playing live. So yeah, I totally wasn't surprised, but it had to be said because sometimes, it's just like, man, you just got to know your stuff and just get in there, especially jazz. It lends itself to improvisation and stuff. So it's like, it's sort of par for the course, Do
you feel like that keeps more of the authentic element compared to other types of music? Because other types, it's like, okay, each sound is going to be individually programmed and it's going to take like a month for this song,
Yeah, that's it, right? And then live, like they just change it up or, and like it's almost every time you're going to hear it, it's never going to be the same.
That's
so you got to be comfortable with that, Another thing I liked, like it was just so freaky that as he was talking, I'm thinking, okay, what should... Like, when you ask that question of like, what should people get into? Who should people get into? How do you start with jazz and stuff like that?
Jazz for dummies, essentially.
Yeah, that's it. And I was just typing here while I was talking. I was typing one of my favorite sort of new artists, and I mean like relatively new to the scene because jazz has been around for a while. And then he just literally spits out the guy that I was saying, Christian Scott, and it's like, wow, I was totally surprised. But yeah, because his when I heard some of his stuff, it reminded me a lot of the first albums of Christian Scott because if it's got that trio vibe where there's a bass, piano, and drums. I love that sound. There's something just magical about that sound. As you heard in the clips, that we put in, like, I don't know, I just find there's something, so much room to maneuver, to move around and stuff in that,
A lot of nice space in there for all types of different ideas. So if you guys want to catch Thompson Egbo-Egbo on tour, he has a show coming up in February at a celebration of Oscar Peterson is the show. It's in Windsor, Ontario. You can check out tickets. All of the links for Thompson Egbo-Egbo are down below in the description of this episode of the Innersleeve Music Podcast. And thank you so much for tuning in to this brand new episode of the show. We're back every single week. Make sure to go subscribe on our YouTube channel and our social media pages at SoundMojo. Hit that follow, hit that like, and subscribe. And of course, make sure to go tune in on our audio platforms as well. We're on Apple Podcasts and Spotify every single week. Make sure to leave us a rating and review and don't miss us. Thanks so much for tuning into this brand new episode of the Innersleeve Music Podcast. We'll catch you guys next week.